I never thought my own flesh and blood would betray me this way. The words cut deeper than any knife could. "Stop living off me," Luke screamed, his face contorted with rage. "Get a job or get out of my house." My house. The very home I had bought 30 years ago, paid off, and now shared with my ungrateful son. After everything I had sacrificed, after all the love I had given him, this was my reward. Something broke inside me that day. Through my tears, I made a decision. I would rewrite my will. Little did Luke know, his inheritance was about to change forever, and his reaction would reveal his true character. When my Margaret passed away 8 years ago, a part of me died with her. We had been married for 32 wonderful years. Pancreatic cancer took her quickly, barely giving us 3 months from diagnosis to the end. Luke was 30 at the time, already established in his career in finance. He flew in for the funeral, stayed 3 days, and then returned to his life in Chicago. I understood. He had responsibilities, clients, a girlfriend. I didn't expect him to put his life on hold for his grieving father. I had my routines to keep me going. The hardware store I had built from nothing had been sold 5 years earlier, when Margaret and I decided to retire early and enjoy our golden years together. We never got those years, but the sale had left me financially secure. Our home was paid off, I had no debt, and my investments provided a comfortable income. For 3 years after Margaret died, I lived alone in our 4-bedroom home. The silence was deafening sometimes, especially during the holidays. Luke would visit twice a year, usually for Thanksgiving and a weekend in the summer. Our relationship was cordial but distant. He was building his life, and I was learning to live with my memories. Then the recession hit. Luke called me one evening, his voice strained. He had been laid off along with half his department. His savings wouldn't cover his expensive Chicago apartment for long. Without hesitation, I offered him his old room back. "Just until you get back on your feet, son," I said. "This house is too big for one person anyway." He moved in 2 weeks later, bringing 3 suitcases and a cloud of defeat. I was secretly happy to have him home. Perhaps this was our chance to rebuild the relationship that had drifted since his mother died. For the first 6 months, Luke actively searched for work. I covered all the household expenses without complaint. It was the least I could do for my son. But as the months stretched into a year, something changed. His job search became less intense. He spent more time playing video games and binge-watching shows. When I gently suggested a few local opportunities, he dismissed them as beneath his qualifications. By the 18-month mark, I was starting to worry. Not about money, but about Luke. He seemed to have settled into a routine of sleeping late, ordering takeout, and staying up all night. When my longtime friend Jack suggested Luke might be taking advantage of the situation, I defended my son fiercely. "He's going through a rough patch," I insisted. "The job market is brutal. He'll find his way." Finally, after 2 years of unemployment, Luke landed a position at a financial consulting firm in town. The salary was excellent, nearly matching what he'd made in Chicago. I was so proud of him for persevering. I expected our living arrangement would change now that he was back on his feet. Perhaps he'd offer to contribute to the household expenses, or even look for his own place. Instead, nothing changed. Luke continued to live rent-free, eating the groceries I bought, using the utilities I paid for, while his bank account grew. Whenever I brought up money, he would change the subject or make vague promises about helping out soon. My friends noticed the changes in me. "Frank, you seem worn down lately," my friend Tom commented during our weekly coffee meetup. "Everything okay with Luke?" I brushed off his concern, not wanting to air family business. But the truth was, living with Luke had become increasingly tense. He treated our home like a hotel, and me like the staff. Still, he was my only child. I didn't want to rock the boat. What Luke didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had received my own difficult news 6 months earlier. During my annual physical, Dr. Harmon had found abnormalities in my blood work. After several tests, the diagnosis came back. Early-stage prostate cancer. It was treatable, with a good prognosis if we acted swiftly. I had started radiation therapy the previous month, going to appointments alone and hiding the side effects from Luke. I didn't want to burden him with my illness, especially when he'd just gotten back on his professional feet. This was the situation on that fateful Tuesday when everything changed between us. I had always believed that blood was thicker than water, that family would stand by you through anything. But I was about to learn a painful lesson about the true nature of my son. The day had started normally enough. I woke early, as has been my habit since my hardware store days. Despite feeling fatigued from yesterday's radiation treatment, I made breakfast and coffee. Luke staggered down around 10:30, grabbed a plate of the pancakes I'd kept warm for him, and grunted something that might have been thanks before disappearing back upstairs. Later that afternoon, I was reviewing some house maintenance issues. The roof needed repairs before winter, and the water heater was showing its age. Since Luke had now been employed at his new job for 8 months, earning a substantial salary, I thought it reasonable to discuss sharing some household costs. I waited until dinner, which I had prepared as usual. Luke came down dressed in an expensive new suit I hadn't seen before. "Going somewhere special tonight?" I asked, serving the pot roast I'd spent hours preparing. "Client dinner," he said, checking his watch. "I can only stay for a quick bite." I nodded, disappointed, but understanding. This seemed like a good opening. "Luke, I wanted to talk to you about the house," I began carefully. "There are some repairs coming up. The roof needs work before the rainy season, and the water heater is on its last legs." He looked up from his phone, frowning. "Okay, and?" "Well, I was thinking since you're doing so well at your new job, maybe you could help with some of these expenses. It's your home too." Luke put his fork down, his expression darkening. "I'm saving for a vacation to Bali next month. It's been a rough few years, Dad. I need this break." I took a deep breath. "I understand that, son. But I've been covering all the household expenses for almost 3 years now. The mortgage is paid off, thanks to Mom and me, but maintenance is costly. I'm not asking for rent, just some help with repairs." "You're retired," he said dismissively. "It's not like you have anything else to spend your money on." The casual cruelty of that statement took my breath away. As if my only purpose in my golden years was to finance his lifestyle. "My retirement savings weren't meant to support both of us indefinitely," I said, my voice growing firmer. "You're making good money now. It's reasonable to expect you to contribute." What happened next still haunts me. Luke's face contorted with an ugly expression I'd never seen before. "Contribute?" he snarled. "I've been stuck in this depressing museum to Mom for years. Do you know what I've given up living here in this backwater town?" I sat back, stunned by his outburst. "I could have moved anywhere after the layoff," he continued, his voice rising. "Instead, I came back to take care of you because I felt sorry for you rattling around this big house alone." "Take care of me?" I repeated incredulously. "Luke, I've paid for everything since you moved back. Food, utilities, your car insurance." He slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes jump. "Stop living off me. I'm sick of your constant neediness. Either get a job to pay for your repairs or sell this dump. I'm not your personal ATM." I felt like I'd been slapped. "This is my house, Luke. I paid for it. I've never asked you for a dime until now." "Your house?" He laughed bitterly. "Then why do I feel like the warden of a retirement home? If you can't contribute financially, maybe it's time you found somewhere else to live." I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. "You're asking me to leave my own home?" "If you can't pull your weight, yeah," he said, already turning back to his phone. "That's how the real world works, Dad. You taught me that, remember? No freeloaders." I left the dining room without another word, retreated to my bedroom, and closed the door quietly. For hours, I sat on the edge of my bed, Margaret's picture clutched in my hands. "Where did we go wrong?" I whispered to her smiling face. We had raised Luke with love, taught him values, sacrificed so he could have opportunities. Now, he was treating me like an unwelcome houseguest in my own home. The next morning, I left before Luke woke up. I drove aimlessly at first, trying to process the painful exchange from the night before. Eventually, I found myself downtown, parked outside a familiar building. Without really planning it, I was at the offices of Jenkins and Associates, the law firm that had handled Margaret's and my affairs for decades. Joanne Jenkins, now in her 60s herself, made time to see me immediately. Her kind eyes filled with concern as I recounted the previous evening's confrontation. "Frank, I'm so sorry," she said when I finished. "That's a terrible way for anyone to speak to their parent, let alone after all you've done for Luke." I sighed heavily. "I keep wondering where I went wrong." "You didn't," she said firmly. "Some people just reveal their character when money is involved." She paused, studying me. "Is that why you're here? To discuss your will?" I nodded slowly. "I think it's time to make some changes. Luke clearly has expectations about his inheritance. But I'm not sure he deserves what Margaret and I had planned for him." What I didn't tell Joanne then was how much those expectations would be disappointed. Luke had no idea about the true extent of my assets. While he believed my only holdings were the house and a modest retirement account, the truth was far different. The hardware store I'd built from the ground up had sold for $7.2 million. Margaret and I had lived simply despite our wealth, investing wisely and giving generously to causes we believed in. Our financial advisor had helped us structure things for tax advantages, creating trusts and diversifying investments. Luke knew none of this, as we had raised him to value hard work rather than expecting an inheritance. Now, as I sat in Joanne's office, I realized it was time to rethink everything. Joanne cleared her schedule for the rest of the morning, sensing the importance of our discussion. She pulled my file, spreading the documents across her desk. "Your current will is straightforward," she began. "The house, investments, and all other assets pass directly to Luke as your sole heir. We drafted this after Margaret's passing." I nodded. That was the plan Margaret and I agreed on. But things have changed. "Before we discuss revisions," Joanne said gently, "I want to make sure this isn't just a reaction to one argument. Family conflicts happen, Frank." "It's not just one argument," I replied, staring out her office window at the town square below. "It's a pattern of behavior that's been building for years. Last night just made it impossible to ignore any longer." I spent the next hour detailing Luke's behavior since moving home. The gradual erosion of respect, the entitlement, the lack of gratitude or reciprocity. I also shared my cancer diagnosis, which visibly shocked Joanne. "Frank, I had no idea," she said. "How are the treatments going?" "Too early to tell. But I'm optimistic," I said, not entirely truthfully. "The fatigue and side effects were worse than I let on. The point is, Luke doesn't even know. He's so wrapped up in himself that he hasn't noticed I'm going to medical appointments 3 times a week." Joanne took detailed notes, her expression growing more troubled. "So what changes would you like to make?" I took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about Susan." Joanne looked up sharply. "Your daughter?" But I thought. "Stepdaughter, technically," I corrected, "from Margaret's first marriage. But I raised her from the time she was 6. She was as much my daughter as Luke is my son." Susan had left home after a bitter argument with Luke, when she was 22 and he was 20. The siblings had never gotten along well, but things had escalated during a holiday visit. Words were exchanged that couldn't be taken back. Susan had stormed out, and our relationship had become strained afterward. Margaret had remained close to her daughter until her death, but my connection with Susan had faded to Christmas cards and occasional phone calls. "The last I heard, she was living in Oregon," I continued. "Single mother to twins, working as a nurse." Joanne nodded, making notes. "And you want to include her in your will?" "I want to do more than that," I said firmly. "I want to reconnect with her and her children. They're my grandchildren, even if there's no biological connection. And from what Margaret told me before she passed, Susan has struggled financially while raising those kids alone." As I spoke, memories flooded back. Susan's wide smile when I'd taught her to ride a bike. Her determination to become a nurse, working 2 jobs to pay for her education. The painful rift that had grown between us, fueled in part by Luke's resentment of his stepsister. What Luke never knew was that Susan had written to me several times over the years. Letters of apology, of explanation, of reconciliation. I had responded cautiously, still hurt by her departure but unwilling to sever ties completely. After Margaret died, the correspondence had continued sporadically. Susan had even asked to visit, but I had hesitated, worried about reopening old wounds. Now I realized my hesitation had cost us precious years. "I've enabled Luke's entitlement," I admitted to Joanne. "I thought I was being a supportive father, but I've actually prevented him from becoming a responsible adult." "So what would you like your new estate plan to look like?" Joanne asked. Over the next 2 hours, we drafted a complete revision. The house would go to Susan and her children, with provisions for Luke to receive certain family heirlooms of sentimental value. My financial assets would be divided, with 50% going to a trust for Susan's children's education, 25% to a cancer research foundation in Margaret's memory, and the remaining 25% to Luke, contingent upon his completion of financial counseling and community service. As we finished the paperwork, I felt a weight lifting. This plan reflected my values and recognized the reality of my children's characters. "There's one more thing," I said as Joanne prepared to finalize the documents. "I'd like to transfer ownership of the house to Susan immediately, while retaining a life estate for myself." Joanne raised her eyebrows. "That's a significant step, Frank. Are you sure?" I nodded firmly. The house was always meant to be a family home, not an investment property. Susan and her children need stability now, not after I'm gone. As I left Joanne's office that afternoon, I felt both lighter and heavier. I had taken steps to correct my mistakes with Luke, but I also had to face the reality that our relationship might never recover. When I arrived home, I found several family heirlooms missing from their usual places. Margaret's antique silver tea service, passed down from her grandmother. The vintage Rolex my father had given me on my 21st birthday. Small items, valuable but not immediately noticeable unless you were looking for them. A sick feeling grew in my stomach as I methodically checked other hiding spots. My suspicions were confirmed when I found empty spaces where Margaret's jewelry had been stored. Items I had been saving for Luke's future wife or daughter were gone. My son had been stealing from me, selling family treasures for cash while living rent-free in my home. The betrayal was almost physically painful. That night, I called Susan's number for the first time in years. For the next 3 days, I maintained a polite distance from Luke. I prepared meals as usual but ate alone, claiming I wasn't hungry when he was home. I spent long hours in my workshop in the garage, a place Luke never ventured. I needed time to process my grief and disappointment before confronting him about the missing heirlooms. On the 4th day, after my visit to Joanne's office, Luke received a letter. I was watering plants on the porch when the mail carrier arrived, and I saw the Jenkins & Associates envelope among the deliveries. Joanne had warned me this might happen. Apparently, her new assistant had taken it upon herself to send a courtesy notice to Luke, informing him that changes had been made to my estate plan. I watched from the window as Luke opened the letter at the kitchen table. His expression changed from curiosity to shock, then to something darker. He pulled out his phone and immediately tried calling me, though I was only 1 room away. I let it ring through to voicemail. He tried again, and again. By evening, he had called 20 times, each call followed by increasingly desperate text messages. "Dad, call me back. Important. We need to talk about this letter I got. Are you serious right now? At least have the guts to face me. This is about last week, isn't it? I was just stressed about work. Didn't mean it." I read each message but responded to none. I wasn't being petty. I was giving myself time to manage my emotions. If Luke had bothered to look for me in the house, he would have found me easily enough. But that would have required effort on his part. On day 5, Luke's strategy changed. He came home early from work with an armful of groceries, something he'd never done before. He awkwardly moved around the kitchen, preparing a basic spaghetti dinner. The sauce came from a jar, and the garlic bread was store-bought. But it was the first meal he'd cooked since moving back home. "Dad," he said when I entered the kitchen, his voice unnaturally cheerful. "Perfect timing. Dinner's almost ready." I sat at the table, observing this performance with sad clarity. "Looks good, Luke." Throughout dinner, Luke was attentive in a way he hadn't been in years. He asked about my day, complimented the house, even mentioned the garden Margaret had loved, and I still maintained. "You know, I've been thinking," he said, refilling my water glass. "I should contribute more around here. You were right about the household expenses. I'll help with the roof and water heater." "That's generous of you," I said neutrally. "And maybe we could plan a trip together," he continued eagerly. "You always wanted to see the Grand Canyon, right? We could do that this fall." I looked at my son, seeing through his sudden transformation. "What about your Bali vacation next month?" He waved dismissively. "That can wait. Family comes first." The words sounded hollow coming from him now. Where was this attitude when I'd been covering his expenses for 3 years? Where was this concern for my well-being when he'd been stealing family heirlooms from under my roof? 2 days later, Luke brought home a guest. Amanda was a pretty woman, in her early 30s, with intelligent eyes and a warm smile. Luke introduced her as his girlfriend of 3 months, information he'd never bothered to share with me before. "I've heard so much about you, Mr. Wilson," she said, shaking my hand. "Luke talks about you constantly." I caught the warning look. Luke shot her and understood immediately. This was another attempt to manipulate me, using Amanda to soften my heart. I played along, preparing a nice dinner and being the gracious host. As the evening progressed, I noticed something interesting. Amanda seemed genuinely kind, asking thoughtful questions about my life and listening attentively to the answers. She showed interest in photos of Margaret, complimented the home sincerely, and even helped clear dishes without being asked. Several times, I caught her giving Luke questioning looks when he made grandiose claims about our close relationship or things he'd supposedly done for me. After dinner, Luke made a show of insisting he would clean up, giving me a well-deserved break. Amanda offered to help me in the garden while Luke tackled the dishes. As we deadheaded Margaret's roses together, Amanda spoke softly. "Mr. Wilson, is everything okay between you and Luke? He's been acting strangely the past week, almost panicky." Her directness surprised me. "Why do you ask?" She glanced toward the house. "He suddenly started talking about you, constantly, showing me pictures, insisting I needed to meet you. Before that, he barely mentioned family at all. I considered my words carefully. Luke and I are working through some issues. Let's just say we've had different recollections of our arrangement here. Amanda nodded slowly. I thought so. Some things weren't adding up. She hesitated. He told me this was his house that you were living in. But when we arrived, I noticed all the plants, the decorations, the maintenance. This clearly isn't the home of a 38-year-old bachelor. Her perception impressed me. You're very observant, Amanda. I'm a social worker, she said with a small smile. Occupational hazard. As we continued gardening, Amanda gently asked more questions. I found myself opening up to this perceptive stranger in a way I hadn't been able to with anyone else. When I mentioned my cancer treatments, her eyes widened in shock. Luke never said anything about that, she whispered. Does he know? He shook my head. He hasn't noticed. Amanda's expression spoke volumes. Before we could continue, Luke called from the patio, his voice overly cheerful as he announced dessert was ready. Later that night, after they had left, I received a text from an unknown number. This is Amanda. Got your number from Luke's phone. Would like to talk more. Important. Can I call you tomorrow? The next day, Amanda called during her lunch break. Her voice was tense. Mr. Wilson, I need to tell you something. After we left last night, Luke was agitated. He kept asking what we talked about in the garden. Then he started drinking and he let some things slip. About gambling debts. About selling some family items to cover losses. My suspicions confirmed. I thanked her for her honesty. There's more, she continued reluctantly. He talked about your will, about how he'd been counting on his inheritance to solve his financial problems. Mr. Wilson, I think he's in deeper trouble than even I realized. The man I met last night isn't the man I thought I was dating. After we hung up, I sat for a long time looking at Margaret's photograph on my bedside table. You always saw people more clearly than I did, I told her image. You warned me about enabling Luke. I should have listened sooner. That evening, I received a text from Susan confirming she would visit the following weekend. The pieces were falling into place, and I felt ready to finally confront Luke with the full truth. Luke cornered me the following morning before I could leave for my radiation treatment. He was still in his bathrobe, hair disheveled, clearly having waited up most of the night. Dad, we need to talk. Now. His tone held none of the false cheerfulness of recent days. I set down my car keys. All right, Luke, let's talk. He followed me to the kitchen, pacing nervously, as I calmly made coffee. I offered him a cup, which he ignored. I got a letter, he began, without preamble. From your lawyer. About changes to your will. Tell me this is a mistake. I stirred cream into my coffee. It's not a mistake. You're cutting me out of my inheritance? His voice cracked with indignation. Your own son? Not cutting you out, I corrected. Restructuring things to better reflect my wishes and values. Luke's face flushed. Because of one stupid argument? I apologized for that. Did you? I asked mildly. I don't recall hearing an apology. He waved impatiently. Well, I'm sorry, okay? I was stressed about work. You know I didn't mean what I said. I studied my son, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time in years. The entitlement, the casual disregard for others, the assumption that an insincere apology would wipe away cruel behavior. This isn't about one argument, Luke. It's about patterns. It's about character. He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. What are you talking about? I've been a good son. I moved back here to keep you company after Mom died. You moved back because you were broke and needed a free place to stay, I said quietly. Which I was happy to provide, because that's what family does for each other. But 3 years later, you're making good money again and still contributing nothing. I told you I'll help with the repairs, he protested. After you found out about the will changes, I pointed out. Not when I initially asked. Luke's expression turned calculating. Is this about money? I can pay rent if that's what you want. It was never about the money itself, I explained. It was about respect, partnership, family supporting each other. You treated this house like a hotel, and me like the staff. His face hardened. So this is punishment. No, Luke. It's consequence. There's a difference. I sighed deeply. But that's not all. I know about the gambling, son. Luke froze. What are you talking about? The online poker. The sports betting. The thousands of dollars in debt you've accumulated while living here rent-free. He swallowed hard. Who told you that? Amanda? I barely mentioned it to her. Does it matter? I know now. Just like I know about the family heirlooms you've been selling. The color drained from his face. Dad, I can explain that. I'm sure you can, I said sadly. You've always been good at explanations and excuses. But the tea service that belonged to your great-grandmother is still gone. Your mother's jewelry that I was saving for your future daughter is still gone. I was going to replace them, he said weakly. With what? The inheritance you were counting on? I shook my head. You can't replace family history, Luke. He slumped into a chair, defensive posture crumbling. For a moment, I saw vulnerability beneath the entitlement, a glimpse of the boy he had once been. What happens now? He asked, his voice small. That depends on you, I replied. But first, there's something else you should know. I took a deep breath. I have cancer, Luke. His head snapped up. What? Prostate cancer. Early stage, but still serious. I've been undergoing radiation treatments for the past month. But how? When? He seemed genuinely shocked. Why didn't you tell me? I've been leaving the house 3 mornings a week for treatments. I've been experiencing side effects, fatigue, nausea. You never noticed, never asked why I was suddenly napping in the afternoons, or why I lost weight. Luke's shock transformed before my eyes, but not into concern for my health. Is it terminal? He asked, and I could see the calculation behind the question, the immediate leap to how my illness would affect him. The prognosis is good with treatment, I said, disappointed but not surprised by his reaction. But it's made me think about what's important. About legacy. Legacy, he repeated bitterly. So you're changing your will while you're sick. Is that even legal? The question revealed everything about his priorities. Not, how can I help you? Or, what do you need? But whether he could challenge my legal right to determine where my assets would go. I'm of sound mind, Luke. If that's what you're asking, I said coldly. Joanne made very sure of that. So what's in this new will? He demanded. What exactly are you doing with your money? My inheritance? I looked him straight in the eyes. The house will go to Susan and her children. Luke bolted up from his chair. Susan? Your precious stepdaughter who abandoned this family? Who broke Mom's heart? Susan never abandoned the family, I corrected him. She left after you made living here impossible for her. She and your mother remained close until the end. This is insane, Luke sputtered. You're giving my house to Susan? It was never your house, Luke. And actually, I'm not giving it to her after I die. I've already transferred ownership. As of yesterday, Susan owns this house, with me retaining a life estate. Luke's face contorted with rage. You can't do that! I already have, I said simply. Susan and her twins will be visiting this weekend. I expect you to be civil. Civil? He nearly screamed. You want me to be civil while you give away my birthright to someone who isn't even your real daughter? From the doorway came a gasp. We both turned to see Amanda standing there, still in her coat, holding the spare key Luke had apparently given her. I came to check on you, she said quietly, looking at me. The door was unlocked. I heard raised voices. Luke's expression cycled rapidly through shock, embarrassment, and anger. This is a private family discussion, he snapped at her. Amanda ignored him, her focus on me. Are you okay, Mr. Wilson? Do you need me to call someone? Before I could answer, Luke stepped between us. This doesn't concern you, Amanda. Actually, she said, straightening her shoulders, I think it does. I care about what happens to your father, and clearly you don't. You don't know anything about our family, Luke snarled. I know enough, she replied evenly. I know he has cancer, and you're more concerned about your inheritance than his health. I know you've been selling his family heirlooms. I know you've been lying to me since we met. Luke's face flushed with anger. So you've been conspiring with him behind my back? I thought you were on my side. This isn't about sides, Amanda said, her voice sad. It's about right and wrong. About how we treat the people who love us. Luke looked from Amanda to me, his expression hardening into something ugly. Fine. Take his side. You're both dead to me. He stormed past Amanda, shoving her shoulder as he went, and slammed out of the house. In the silence that followed, Amanda approached me cautiously. I'm so sorry, Mr. Wilson. I didn't mean to make things worse. I shook my head. You didn't. This confrontation was inevitable. I gestured to a chair. Coffee? As we sat together at the kitchen table, I felt a strange sense of peace. The truth was finally out in the open, painful as it was. And in Amanda, I saw the kindness and integrity that I had tried to instill in Luke. I should probably find another place to stay, I said, half to myself. At least until Susan arrives. Absolutely not, Amanda said firmly. This is your home. Luke should be the one to leave. She hesitated. If you'd like, I can stay with you for a few days. As a friend. I'm worried about how Luke might react. I was touched by her offer. You hardly know me. She smiled gently. I know enough. And besides, I'd like to meet Susan and her children. As a social worker, I might be able to help with the transition. As Amanda helped me prepare for my afternoon treatment, I reflected on how sometimes family is found in unexpected places, while blood ties can prove disappointingly fragile. Susan arrived on Saturday morning with her twins, Emma and Jack, both 12 years old. The moment I opened the door and saw her standing there, so much like her mother with the same warm eyes and determined chin, emotions overwhelmed me. We stood awkwardly for a moment before she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. I've missed you, Dad, she whispered against my shoulder. Despite not sharing blood, she had always called me Dad from the time I married Margaret. Hearing the word from her now, after so many years, brought tears to my eyes. I've missed you too, Susie, I replied, using the childhood nickname she had once pretended to hate. She pulled back, wiping her own tears, and turned to the two children standing shyly behind her. This is Emma and Jack. Kids, this is your grandpa Frank. The twins, fraternal rather than identical, regarded me with curious expressions. Emma had her mother's features, but with auburn hair instead of Susan's blonde. Jack was taller, with serious eyes that studied me carefully. Nice to meet you, sir, Jack said formally, extending his hand. I shook it solemnly, recognizing a fellow old soul. The pleasure is mine, Jack. Emma was less reserved. After a moment's hesitation, she stepped forward and hugged me impulsively. Mom has your pictures all over our apartment, she informed me, and she talks about you and Grandma Margaret all the time. Something tight in my chest loosened at her words. Susan hadn't forgotten us, hadn't erased us from her life, as I had sometimes feared. She had kept our memory alive for her children. Amanda had insisted on staying to help with the arrival, preparing refreshments and making the twins feel welcome while Susan and I retreated to the sunroom for a long overdue conversation. I don't know where to begin, Susan said, looking around the familiar space, largely unchanged since her childhood. There's so much to say. Perhaps with an apology, I suggested gently. From me. I should have tried harder to heal the rift between us after you left. She shook her head firmly. No, Dad. I was the one who left. I should have come back sooner. You wrote letters, I acknowledged. I kept everyone. But you never invited me to visit, she said softly. I wasn't sure I was welcome. I was afraid, I admitted. Afraid of reopening old wounds. Afraid of forcing you to confront Luke again. He was very angry after you left. Susan's expression clouded. He always resented me. From the day you and Mom married, he saw me as competition. I know that now, I said heavily. I didn't want to see it then. I wanted so badly for you two to be close, to be real siblings. Some people aren't capable of sharing, Dad, she said with the wisdom of hard experience. Luke always needed to be the center of attention, the favorite child. We talked for hours, filling in the years of separation. Susan's nursing career, her brief marriage to the twins' father who had left when they were toddlers, her struggles and triumphs as a single parent. I shared stories of Margaret's final years, the joy we had found together despite knowing our time was limited. She was so proud of you, I told Susan. Every achievement, every obstacle you overcame, she celebrated. I wish I'd seen her one last time, Susan said, tears gathering. When she told me about the diagnosis, I was saving for a plane ticket, but then, she knew you would have come if you could, I assured her. She never doubted your love. Later, as Amanda and I prepared dinner, Susan showed the twins around the property. Through the kitchen window, I watched them exploring the old treehouse I had built, examining Margaret's garden, discovering the tire swing still hanging from the oak tree. They seem like wonderful kids, Amanda commented, following my gaze. They are, I agreed. Smart, polite, curious. Susan has done an amazing job raising them alone. And Susan seems lovely, Amanda added. Nothing like how Luke described her. I wasn't surprised. Luke has always had his own version of reality, where he's the hero, and everyone else is either a villain or a supporting character. Amanda hesitated. Have you heard from him? Not directly, I admitted. But his car has been parked down the street several times. I think he's been watching the house, waiting for Susan to arrive. As if summoned by our conversation, the front door slammed open. Luke stormed into the kitchen, his face flushed with rage or alcohol or both. Family reunion time? He sneered. How touching. Amanda stepped protectively closer to me. Luke, this isn't the time. Shut up, he snapped at her. This doesn't concern you. It concerns anyone who cares about your father, she replied steadily. Luke ignored her, focusing his anger on me. You've been planning this all along, haven't you? Reconnecting with precious Susan, bringing her home to replace me? No one is replacing anyone, I said calmly. There's room in this family for both of you. This family? He laughed bitterly. You? Your stepdaughter? And her brats? That's not my family. The back door opened, and Susan entered with the twins. She froze when she saw Luke, instinctively putting an arm around each child. Hello, Luke, she said, her voice neutral. Luke turned, his expression darkening further. Well, well, the prodigal daughter returns, just in time to claim her inheritance. Susan stiffened. I didn't come for money or property. I came because Frank asked me to. It's Dad to you, Luke sneered. Or did you forget he married your mother? Though I guess that didn't stop you from abandoning him when things got tough. That's not what happened, Susan said quietly. And you know it. I know you left this family when Mom got sick, Luke accused. Left Dad alone to deal with everything while you ran off to Oregon. I left because you made it impossible for me to stay, Susan corrected him. Because you told me I wasn't really part of this family. That I had no right to be involved in Mom's care decisions. She was my mother, not yours. She was my mother for 16 years, Susan replied, her voice shaking. She was the only mother I ever knew. The twins watched this exchange with wide, uncomfortable eyes. Jack moved slightly in front of his sister, a protective gesture that spoke volumes. Luke, I intervened, this is neither the time nor the place. Susan and the children have just arrived. We're about to have dinner. Oh, I'm sorry, Luke said with exaggerated politeness. Am I interrupting the happy family meal? Should I come back when it's more convenient to discuss how you're giving away my birthright? That's enough, Amanda said firmly. There are children present. Luke rounded on her. Mind your own business. You've known my father for what, a week? You don't get a vote here. I'd had enough. Luke, you need to leave. Now. When you're sober and calm, we can talk. Leave? He laughed harshly. Leave my own home? It's not your home, I reminded him. It never was. And now, legally, it belongs to Susan. The twins gasped in unison. Susan shot me a startled look, clearly unaware that I had already transferred the property to her. Luke's face contorted with fury. You actually did it? You gave her the house already? Yes, I said simply. This home was meant for family, for children and grandchildren, for people who care about each other, not just what they can get. You'll regret this, Luke threatened, backing toward the door. Both of you will. This isn't over. After he left, the kitchen remained silent until Emma spoke up in a small voice. Is he always that angry? Susan hugged her daughter. No, sweetheart. Uncle Luke is just going through a hard time right now. Later that night, after the twins were settled in their rooms, Susan and I sat on the back porch, the same place where Margaret and I had spent countless evenings. You didn't have to give me the house, Dad, Susan said softly. That wasn't why I came. I know that, I assured her. But this house should be filled with family, with children. It's too big for just me. And Luke. I trailed off. Has never really appreciated what he has, Susan finished for me. He was the same way as a kid, always wanting more, never satisfied with what was right in front of him. I failed him somehow, I said. The thought that had haunted me for weeks. I must have. For him to turn out this way. Susan took my hand. You didn't fail him, Dad. You and Mom were wonderful parents. Some people just choose their own path, regardless of how they were raised. I'm not giving up on him entirely, I admitted. There's still a portion of my estate set aside for him, if he can demonstrate some growth. That's more than fair, Susan said. More than most parents would do after what he's put you through. We sat in comfortable silence, listening to the crickets and distant traffic sounds. The kids and I can move in whenever you're ready, Susan said eventually. My lease in Oregon ends next month. I've already applied for a transfer to the hospital here. Actually, I said hesitantly, I was thinking of moving into the guest house. It's plenty big enough for one person, and it would give you and the twins more space in the main house. Dad, no, Susan protested. This is your home. We can find our own place. This arrangement would make me happy, I insisted. Being close to my grandchildren, while still having my independence. The perfect solution for all of us. As we continued discussing logistics, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. This was what Margaret would have wanted our home to be. A place of love, of connection, of family supporting one another through good times and bad. I couldn't help but hope that someday, Luke might find his way back to us, changed by his experiences. But even if he didn't, I knew now that I had family who truly cared about me, not just what I could provide. 3 weeks after Susan's arrival, I moved into the guest house while she and the twins settled into the main home. The arrangement suited us perfectly. I had my privacy and independence, while being just steps away from family meals, game nights, and the everyday joys of watching my grandchildren grow. My cancer treatments continued, but with Susan's nursing knowledge and emotional support, the side effects became more manageable. To everyone's relief, early results showed the cancer responding well to treatment. The twins brought an energy to the property that had been missing for years. Jack, thoughtful and methodical, spent hours with me in the workshop, learning woodworking skills with remarkable patience for a 12-year-old. Emma, creative and outgoing, took over Margaret's garden, researching plant care online and seeking my memories of which flowers her grandmother had loved most. Amanda became a regular visitor, her friendship with both Susan and me deepening over shared meals and conversations. Her professional experience proved invaluable as the twins adjusted to their new school and community. Of Luke, we saw and heard nothing for almost 6 months. His belongings remained untouched in his old room, but he never returned to claim them. Susan discovered he had emptied his desk at work and apparently left town without notice. While I worried about him, I also recognized that sometimes people need to hit bottom before they can begin to climb back up. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, he appeared at the guest house door. The changes in him were immediately apparent. He had lost weight, his designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a worn jacket. Most noticeably, the arrogant confidence was gone from his posture and expression. "Dad," he said simply when I opened the door. "Can we talk?" I invited him in, offering coffee, which he accepted with uncharacteristic gratitude. For several minutes, we sat in silence, Luke staring into his mug, as if searching for words. "I hit rock bottom," he finally said. "Lost my job, my apartment, maxed out my credit cards, ended up sleeping in my car for a while." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "The gambling got worse after I left," he admitted. "I convinced myself one big win would solve everything, would let me show you and Susan that I didn't need your charity." He laughed bitterly. "Instead, I lost everything." "I'm sorry you went through that," I said sincerely. No parent wants to see their child suffer, even when the suffering is self-inflicted. Luke looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "I don't deserve your sympathy. I was horrible to you, to Susan, to everyone." "Yes, you were," I agreed calmly. "But acknowledging that is the first step toward change." He set down his mug with shaking hands. "I've been in rehab, for the gambling, and therapy. Lots of therapy. Turns out I've got some issues to work through." "We all do, son." The therapist helped me see how I've been blaming everyone else for my problems. How I've been taking advantage of people who care about me, pushing away anyone who calls me on my behavior. I studied my son, looking for signs of the manipulation that had been his standard operating procedure for so long. Instead, I saw genuine shame and the raw vulnerability of someone facing hard truths about himself. "What do you want now, Luke?" I asked directly. He took a deep breath, a chance to make amends. "To you first, then Susan, Amanda, anyone else I've hurt. I don't expect forgiveness right away. I know I need to earn that. And financially? What are you hoping for there?" Luke met my eyes squarely. "Nothing. I'm not here for money or housing or anything material. I found a job at a warehouse across town. It's minimum wage, but it's honest work. I'm staying at a recovery house for now." I considered his words carefully. "I believe you mean what you're saying today. But recovery isn't a straight line. There will be setbacks, temptations." "I know," he acknowledged. "That's why I'm taking it one day at a time. My sponsor is helping me stay accountable." "What would making amends look like to you?" I asked. Luke seemed to have thought about this. "Replacing the heirlooms I sold, for starters. I've been setting aside money from each paycheck. It'll take time, but I'm committed to it." "And with Susan?" A flash of the old resentment crossed his face, quickly replaced by resignation. "I need to apologize to her. For everything, going all the way back to when we were kids. I was jealous of her relationship with you and Mom. I wanted to be the only child, the center of attention." "That's surprisingly insightful," I observed. Luke shrugged. "Hundreds of hours of therapy will do that. Doesn't make it any easier to admit." Over the next hour, we talked more openly than we had in years. Luke's journey had been difficult, but necessary. The entitlement and arrogance had been burned away, leaving behind the potential for a more authentic, humble person. I'd like you to meet with Susan, I said eventually, if you're ready for that. And the twins. They're your family too, whether you've acknowledged it or not. Luke nodded, clearly nervous but determined. I'd like that. When you think the time is right. That meeting happened the following weekend, carefully orchestrated with Amanda's help. There were tears, painful admissions, tentative steps toward reconciliation. Susan, always the more emotionally generous of my children, offered forgiveness that Luke admitted he hadn't yet earned. Then earn it, she told him simply. Show us who you really want to be, not who you've been. In the months that followed, Luke slowly rebuilt his life and relationships. He continued his warehouse job, refusing my offers of financial help. He attended twice-weekly therapy and Gamblers Anonymous meetings. He spent Sundays with the family, gradually forming connections with Emma and Jack, who approached their uncle with the remarkable resilience of children. On the one-year anniversary of my cancer diagnosis, we received the news we had been hoping for: complete remission. The family celebrated with a backyard barbecue, Luke manning the grill with newfound humility and genuine pleasure in serving others. After the twins were in bed, the adults gathered on the patio with glasses of wine. Luke raised his glass of sparkling water. To Dad's health, he said, and to second chances. Second chances, we echoed. Later, as the evening wound down, I took Luke aside. I've been thinking about my will again. He stiffened slightly, then deliberately relaxed. That's your business, Dad. I'm not entitled to anything. Nevertheless, I continued, I've decided to adjust things. The house will remain Susan's, as it should, but I'm removing the conditions from your portion of the financial assets. Why? He asked, genuinely confused. I haven't earned that yet. Because you've demonstrated real change, I explained. Not perfect, not complete, but real. You've taken responsibility, made amends, committed to your recovery. That's what I wanted to see. I don't know what to say, Luke murmured. Say you'll continue on this path, I replied. Not for the inheritance, but for yourself. For the man you're becoming. Luke nodded, emotion evident in his eyes. I promise. As we rejoined the others, I looked around at my family with profound gratitude. Susan and Amanda, deep in conversation about the twins' education. Luke showing Jack a simple card trick. The home filled with laughter and connection. The path here had been painful, with betrayals and confrontations I never would have chosen. But those difficult moments had ultimately led to honesty, growth, and healing. By standing firm in my values, by refusing to enable harmful behavior, I had actually helped my son find his way back to his better self. Family, I had learned, isn't just about blood ties or legal relationships. It's about showing up for each other, speaking truth with love, setting healthy boundaries, and being willing to do the hard work of reconciliation. It's about recognizing our own mistakes and having the courage to change course. As the evening ended, Luke approached me one last time. Thank you, he said quietly. Not just for tonight, but for not giving up on me when you had every right to. That's what fathers do, I replied simply. We hold on to hope, even when it seems foolish. He smiled, a genuine smile without calculation or agenda. I'm starting to understand that now. And in that moment, looking at my son's face, I knew that whatever happened in the future, this difficult journey had been worth it. The will that had once been a source of division had become, ironically, the catalyst for our family's healing and renewal. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that hurt someone you loved, but ultimately led to positive change? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I wish you wisdom and courage in your own family journeys.